Danny Cole had seen many strange things during his 3 years traveling between worlds. He had walked through forests made of crystal on Vega Prime. He had swum in oceans that glowed purple under twin moons. He had shared meals with beings who had no mouths and communicated through colors dancing across their skin. But nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed on the planet. He stood at the edge of a massive stone compound, his breath catching in his throat. The air smelled of smoke and something else, something metallic that he realized with growing horror was blood. The had invited him here as part of the Earth Alliance Cultural Exchange Program. They wanted to show off their greatest achievement. They called it the Dragon Halls. There were tall reptilian beings who walked on two legs and spoke in hissing voices that Danny had learned to understand over the past month. Their scales ranged from deep green to muddy brown, and their yellow eyes held no warmth. They had conquered their world through one advantage. They had learned to breed and control dragons. Danny followed his guide, an official named, through the compound gates. Inside, he saw rows of massive pens built from black iron. Each pen held a dragon. Some were enormous, with scales like armor plates and teeth longer than his forearm. Others were smaller, curled in corners, their ribs visible through dull and damaged scales. The larger ones, explained with pride, were the males. They were bred for war and labor. They were valuable. The smaller ones were females. They were worthless. Danny wanted to ask why, but he already knew the answer. He had read the briefing files. Society valued strength above all else. Male dragons grew twice the size of females. Males could carry warriors into battle and pull great loads. Females were smaller and considered good only for breeding, but even in breeding they had to prove their worth. Led him to a pen at the far end of the compound. A handler stood outside it, holding a long metal rod that crackled with electricity. Inside the pen, Danny saw a dragon unlike any of the others. Her scales were gold, bright and beautiful even under the layer of dirt and dried blood that covered them. She was perhaps 15 feet long from nose to tail, small by standards. Her wings were folded tight against her body, and her head hung low. When she looked up at Danny, he saw intelligence in her amber eyes. He also saw pain. "Her name is," said, "she is our greatest failure." Danny did not understand at first. The golden dragon was beautiful. Her scales suggested rare genetics that any breeder would value, but explained with disgust in his voice. Had produced 3 clutches of eggs in 3 years. Each clutch had hatched only females, not a single male. The belief that dragons could control the gender of their offspring through will and desire. A dragon who hatched only females was defying her masters. She was being disobedient. So they punished her. Danny watched as the handler, a cruel-looking name, entered the pen. Tried to back away, but chains around her neck held her in place. Raised the electric rod and struck her across the snout. The dragon made a sound that Danny would never forget. It was not a roar or a screech. It was a whimper. It was the sound of a creature who had given up hope. Danny stepped forward without thinking, grabbed his arm and held him back. "This is not your concern, human," the elder said. "She must learn. Her next clutch will hatch in 7 days. If she produces females again, she will be executed. That is our way." Danny wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that dragon gender was determined by genetics and incubation temperature, not by the mother's wishes. He had studied xenobiology for 15 years. He knew that no creature in any galaxy could choose the gender of its offspring through willpower. They were punishing for something she could not control. But he said nothing. He was a guest here. The Earth Alliance had strict rules about interfering with alien cultures. He was supposed to observe and document, nothing more. So he stood and watched as struck the golden dragon again and again until she collapsed on the stone floor of her pen. That night Danny could not sleep. He lay in his quarters at the human diplomatic station and stared at the ceiling. He kept hearing that whimper. He kept seeing those amber eyes filled with pain and despair. He had traveled to 100 worlds and seen wonders beyond imagination. But he had also seen cruelty. He had learned that cruelty existed everywhere, in every species, on every planet. Usually he could walk away. Usually he could tell himself that it was not his place to judge. But something about would not let him walk away. The next morning he returned to the compound. He told that he wanted to study the dragons more closely for his research. The elder agreed, pleased that the human was showing interest in culture. Danny spent the day moving between pens, taking notes on his, pretending to be a neutral scientist. But he kept returning to. She watched him with those intelligent eyes. When the handlers were not looking, Danny moved closer to her pen. He spoke to her in a soft voice, telling her that he was sorry, telling her that she did not deserve this. He did not know if she understood his words, but she seemed to understand his tone. Her head lifted slightly. Her eyes followed him as he moved. On the third day, Danny noticed something that made his heart ache. Had built a nest in the corner of her pen using bits of straw and scraps of cloth. She had arranged them carefully, creating a warm and protected space. And in that nest sat 5 eggs, their shells a pale cream color with golden speckles. Her 4th clutch was almost ready to hatch. Danny looked at the eggs and then at. The dragon looked back at him, and in that moment, he saw something in her eyes that he recognized. It was the desperate hope of a mother who knew she could not protect her children. It was a plea for help from someone who had no one else to turn to. Appeared behind Danny, making him jump. "Beautiful, are they not?" the handler said with a cold smile. "We will know soon if she has finally learned her lesson. If not, she will watch her daughters die before we kill her. That is the price of defiance." Danny said nothing, but as he walked away from the compound that evening, he made a decision. He did not know how yet. He did not know what it would cost him, but he was not going to let die. He was not going to let her daughters be killed for the crime of being born female. Some things were wrong no matter what culture you came from. Some cruelty could not be excused or ignored, and Danny Cole had never been very good at walking away. The eggs began to crack on the 7th day. Danny stood in the shadows of the hatching chamber, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had come early, before the handlers arrived, wanting to witness the moment without the presence of cruelty. The chamber was warm and humid, lit by glowing stones embedded in the walls. Lay curled around her nest, her golden scales catching the soft light. She had not eaten in 3 days. The handlers had her food as motivation to produce males. The first egg split open with a soft sound. A tiny head emerged, covered in wet scales that would dry to a beautiful bronze color. The hatchling made a small chirping noise and responded with a low rumble from deep in her throat. It was the gentlest sound Danny had ever heard from a dragon. She nudged the baby with her snout, helping it free itself from the shell. One by one the eggs hatched. Danny counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. All females, their scales ranging from bronze to copper to pale gold. Cleaned each one with her tongue, her movements careful and loving. Despite everything she had suffered, despite knowing what would happen to her daughters, she still cared for them with all the tenderness of a devoted mother. The 5th egg cracked last. Danny held his breath as a slightly larger hatchling emerged. Its scales were darker, almost iron-colored. A male. Just 1 male out of 5, but perhaps it would be enough. Perhaps that would show mercy. The chamber door slammed open. Entered first, followed by Elder and a group of handlers. They carried the electric rods and chains and other tools that Danny did not want to think about. Approached the nest and examined the hatchlings with cold, yellow eyes. He counted them just as Danny had. His lipless mouth twisted into a sneer. 4 females, he announced to the room. 1 male, she has failed again. Stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The agreement was clear. 3 clutches of failures would result in execution. This is her 4th failure. The sentence is death. Seemed to understand. She pulled her hatchlings closer with her front legs, covering them with her wing. She looked at and made that whimpering sound again, the sound that had haunted Danny's dreams for a week. She was begging. A creature of fire and flight, A being who could have burned this compound to ashes if she were free, was begging for the lives of her children. Laughed, he raised his electric rod and stepped toward the nest. Danny moved without thinking. He stepped out of the shadows and placed himself between and the dragon. The handler stopped, more surprised than angry. "Move aside," Human hissed. "This does not concern you." Danny did not move. He stood his ground even though his legs were shaking. "You are wrong," he said, "about all of it. Dragons cannot choose the gender of their offspring. No creature can. It is determined by genetics and incubation temperature. You are punishing her for something beyond her control." His eyes narrowed. "You dare lecture us about our own dragons. We have bred them for 1,000 years. We know their nature." "You know how to hurt them," Danny replied. "That is not the same as understanding them." The chamber fell silent, watched the exchange with interest, his head tilted to one side. The other handlers gripped their weapons, waiting for an order. Danny knew he had crossed a line. He knew that interfering with cultural practices could create a diplomatic incident. He might be expelled from the planet. He might be arrested. He did not care. Finally spoke. The human raises an interesting point. Perhaps he has studied these things more than we have. Turned to the elder with disbelief. "You cannot be considering his words. He is an outsider. He knows nothing of our ways." Held up a clawed hand for silence. "I am considering the political implications. If we execute this dragon while a human observer protests, it could damage our relationship with the Earth Alliance. They are sensitive about these matters." He paused, his yellow eyes studying Danny. "The execution will be delayed, for now. But the human will stay away from the breeding compound. This is a matter, and he has interfered enough." Danny wanted to argue, but he recognized a small victory. Was still alive. Her hatchlings were still alive. He had bought them time, even if it was only a little. He nodded once and allowed the handlers to escort him out of the chamber. But he did not stay away. That night, when the moons rose high and the compound fell quiet, Danny returned. He had studied the patrol schedules for days. He knew which guards were lazy and which sections of the fence were poorly watched. He slipped through a gap in the perimeter and made his way to Spen. She was awake, her amber eyes gleaming in the darkness. Her hatchlings slept beneath her wing, tiny forms rising and falling with each breath. When she saw Danny approach, she did not growl or snap. She simply watched him, waiting. Danny opened his pack and removed his medical kit. He had brought bandages and antiseptic cream and a salve that would help her wounds heal faster. He did not know if it would work on dragon physiology, but he had to try. "I am going to help you," he whispered. "I know you do not understand my words, but please understand that I am not here to hurt you." He reached through the bars of her pen, moving slowly so she would not be startled. She watched his hand approach. For a moment, Danny thought she might bite it off. Instead, she lowered her head and allowed him to touch her. Her scales were warm, almost hot, beneath his fingers. He found the wounds where Srod had burned her flesh and began applying the salve. Made a soft sound, different from the whimper of pain. It was almost like a sigh of relief. Danny worked for an hour, treating every wound he could reach. He talked to her the whole time, keeping his voice low and gentle. He told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests. He told her about his childhood, about the dog he had loved who had died too young. He told her that he understood what it meant to lose someone you loved and feel powerless to stop it. When he finished, did something that surprised him. She pressed her snout against his palm and held it there. Her breath was warm on his skin. Her eyes, those intelligent amber eyes, looked into his with something that might have been gratitude. "You are welcome," Danny said softly. "I will come back tomorrow, and the day after that. I am going to find a way to save you, I promise." He did not know if he could keep that promise. He did not know what power one human had against an entire civilization built on cruelty. But as he slipped back through the darkness toward the diplomatic station, he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to abandon her. no matter what it cost. Commander Lisa Grant looked at Danny across her desk with tired eyes. She was a woman in her 50s who had spent 30 years navigating the politics between Earth and alien civilizations. She had seen idealistic young officers come and go. She had watched them burn out or give up or learn to accept the things they could not change. She had hoped Danny would be different. "You want me to authorize the extraction of a dragon," she said flatly, "from a breeding compound. Do you understand what you are asking?" Danny nodded. "I understand the risks, but I have read the Earth Alliance Charter from start to finish. Provision 7C allows for the humanitarian extraction of any being facing imminent death if that being shows evidence of sentience or near sentience." "Dragons are not sentient," Grant replied. "They are animals, impressive animals, dangerous animals, but animals nonetheless." Danny placed his on her desk. "For the past 5 days I have documented its behavior. She recognizes individual handlers and responds differently to each one. She understands simple commands in the language, which means she can learn and remember language patterns. When her female hatchlings from previous clutches were killed in front of her, she displayed grief behaviors that lasted for weeks. She stopped eating. She made sounds of distress. She tried to protect their bodies." Grant picked up and scrolled through the files. Danny had recorded hours of video. He had written detailed notes about every interaction he had observed. He had compared its behaviors to established markers of intelligence used by across the galaxy. "This is thorough work," Grant admitted, "but even if I accept your premise, they will not. They will see this as theft. They will see it as an attack on their culture." "Their culture is built on cruelty," Danny said. "I know we are supposed to respect alien traditions. I know we are supposed to observe and not interfere. But there has to be a line somewhere. There has to be something we will not accept, some suffering we will not allow just because someone else considers it normal." Grant was quiet for a long moment. She set down and looked at Danny with an expression he could not read. "I have been in this job for a long time," she said finally. "I have made compromises that keep me awake at night. I have looked the other way when I should have spoken up. I have told myself that the greater good required small sacrifices." She paused. "Maybe I have been wrong. Maybe the greater good does not mean anything if we abandon it whenever it becomes inconvenient." Danny felt hope rise in his chest. "Does that mean you will help me?" Grant shook her head slowly. "I cannot authorize an extraction. The political consequences would be severe. Earth cannot afford to make enemies of the right now." She held up a hand before Danny could protest. "But I can give you information. Provision 7C has a subsection that most people do not know about. If a private citizen of the Earth Alliance files a personal claim for an alien creature under scientific protection protocols, and if that claim is supported by documented evidence of intelligence, they would be legally obligated to honor it under the trade agreements they signed with us 15 years ago." Danny stared at her. "You mean I can claim myself, as an individual, with legitimate research interests?" Grant leaned back in her chair. "The paperwork would have to be perfect. The evidence would have to be undeniable. And you would be taking all the risk yourself. If this fails, if they refuse your claim, you will be on your own. Earth cannot protect you." "I understand," Danny said. "Thank you, Commander." He spent the next 2 days preparing. He gathered every piece of evidence he had collected. He wrote a formal scientific claim that cited its behaviors, her responses, her emotional capacity. He documented the conditions of her captivity and the imminent threat to her life. He did everything by the book, following every regulation and protocol. But while he worked, time was running out. On the morning of the second day, Danny received a message from a contact inside the compound. Had grown impatient. He had announced that would be executed in 2 days, regardless of what Elder had promised. The political considerations no longer mattered to him. He wanted her dead. Danny worked faster. He barely slept. He reviewed his documents again and again, looking for any weakness that they might exploit. He practiced what he would say before their council. He prepared for every argument they might make. On the night before the deadline, he visited one last time. She was waiting for him, her head lifted toward the gap in the fence where he always entered. Her wounds had healed thanks to the salve he had applied each night. Her scales had regained some of their luster, but there was still fear in her amber eyes. She knew something was coming. She could sense the danger closing in. Danny sat beside her pen and spoke to her softly. "Tomorrow, I am going to do something that might not work. I am going to ask them to let you go. They might say no. They might laugh at me. They might throw me out of this compound and this planet, and I will never see you again." Made a low sound in her throat. It was not quite a purr, not quite a growl, something in between. "But I have to try," Danny continued, "because you deserve better than this. Your daughters deserve better, and I cannot live with myself if I walk away and do nothing." He reached through the bars and touched her snout. She pressed against his hand, warm and solid and alive. "If this works, I am going to take you somewhere safe, somewhere you can fly, somewhere no one will ever hurt you again." He smiled even though his eyes were wet. "You come with me. That is what I am going to tell them. You come with me." Looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she had never done before. She opened her mouth slightly, and a soft glow appeared in the back of her throat. Not fire, not yet, but the potential for fire. The heat of it warmed Danny's face. It was a display of trust. She was showing him her weapon, her only defense, and choosing not to use it. She was telling him, in the only way she could, that she believed in him. Danny stood and wiped his eyes. "Tomorrow," he said. "Everything changes tomorrow." He walked back to the diplomatic station as dawn began to color the sky. In a few hours, he would face the council. He would present his evidence. He would make his claim. And one way or another, the fate of a golden dragon would be decided. He was terrified, but he was also ready. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds were against you. Some beings were worth saving, even when the whole world told you it was impossible. Danny had learned that lesson a long time ago. And he was not about to forget it now. The council chamber was carved from black stone that seemed to swallow the light. Torches burned in iron brackets along the walls, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the 12 elders who sat in a curved row on a raised platform. Elder sat at the center, his yellow eyes fixed on Danny with cold interest. Danny stood alone in the middle of the chamber. He wore his formal Earth Alliance uniform, the one with the silver insignia that marked him as a. His was clutched in his hands, containing every piece of evidence he had gathered over the past weeks. Behind him, the chamber doors remained open, and through them he could hear the distant sounds of the breeding compound. Somewhere out there waited. "You have requested an audience with this council," said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You have claimed that you wish to invoke Provision 7C of the Earth Trade Agreement. Is this correct?" "It is," Danny replied. He was surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. He had been waiting there, Danny realized, like a predator stalking its prey. "This is absurd," the handler hissed. "A human wants to steal our property based on some obscure legal technicality. We should throw him out of this chamber and proceed with the execution as planned." Raised a clawed hand. "We are bound by the agreements we have signed. Let the human speak. If his claim has no merit, we will dismiss it. If it violates our laws, we will punish him accordingly. Either way, we lose nothing by hearing him out." Danny took a deep breath. He had practiced this moment 100 times in his mind, but now that it had arrived, he felt the weight of it pressing down on him. Provision 7C of our trade agreement allows any citizen of the Earth Alliance to file a protective claim for an alien creature if that creature demonstrates evidence of sentience or near sentience. He held up his. "Over the past 3 weeks, I have documented behaviors in the dragon known as that meat and exceed the standard markers for intelligence." The elders shifted in their seats. Some looked skeptical, others looked amused, let out a harsh laugh. "Dragons are beasts," he said. "They have no more intelligence than the livestock we raise for meat." "Then explain this," Danny replied. He activated his and projected a holographic video onto the chamber floor. The image showed in her pen, watching as different handlers approached. When appeared in the footage, she shrank back and made sounds of distress. When a younger handler who had occasionally shown her kindness appeared, her posture relaxed. "She recognizes individuals," Danny said. "She remembers which ones have hurt her and which ones have not. This requires memory, pattern recognition, and emotional response. These are markers of intelligence." He showed another video. This one captured arranging the materials of her nest with careful precision, testing different configurations until she found one that satisfied her. "Problem-solving behavior," Danny explained. "She is not acting on instinct. She is making decisions based on evaluation and judgment." Stepped closer, his eyes narrowed. "Tricks. These are the tricks of a cunning animal. Dogs and birds can perform similar behaviors. Do you claim they are sentient too?" "I claim that demonstrates intelligence at a level comparable to or exceeding the great apes of Earth," Danny replied. "Species that our laws protect from cruelty and exploitation." He paused, looking directly at. "I also claim that she displays emotional depth that goes beyond mere animal instinct." He showed a final video. This one was harder to watch. It showed immediately after one of her previous clutches had been taken from her. Her female hatchlings had been killed while she was chained and forced to watch. In the footage, she made sounds of anguish. She tried to reach the bodies of her daughters. When the handlers finally removed them, she curled into a ball and refused to move for days. "This is grief," Danny said quietly. "This is a mother mourning her children. This is not the behavior of a mindless beast. This is the suffering of a thinking, feeling being who understands loss." The chamber was silent, even had stopped smirking. Leaned forward. "Your evidence is compelling, human, but evidence can be manipulated. Videos can be edited. How do we know this is not some elaborate deception?" Danny had prepared for this question. "Test me," he said. "Right now. Let me enter's pen without weapons or protection. If she is the mindless beast you claim, she will attack me. She has every reason to hate the beings who have tormented her. But if she recognizes me as someone who has shown her kindness, if she chooses not to harm me, then you will have your proof." Laughed again, but there was uncertainty in it now. "You would risk your life for this creature?" "Yes," Danny said simply, "I would." The elders murmured among themselves, silenced them with a gesture. He studied Danny for a long moment, his reptilian face impossible to read. "Very well," the elder said at last. "We accept your test. If the dragon attacks you, your claim is invalid and you will withdraw it. If she does not attack you, we will consider your evidence further." They walked to the breeding compound in a procession. The 12 elders, a dozen handlers, and Danny at the center of them all. Word had spread through the compound, and workers stopped their tasks to watch. No human had ever entered a dragon pen before. Most assumed it would be the last thing he ever did. His pen was opened. The chains that usually held her had been removed. She was free to move, free to strike. She stood in the center of the space, her golden scales gleaming, her amber eyes fixed on the crowd that had gathered. Danny stepped through the gate, turned to face him. She was large enough to kill him with a single bite, a single swipe of her claws. The heat from her body made the air shimmer. Behind him, Danny heard the handlers readying their weapons, expecting blood. He walked toward her slowly. Each step felt like a mile. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. But he did not stop. He did not show fear. When he was close enough to touch her, he knelt. He extended his hand, palm up, just as he had done through the bars of her pen each night. Lowered her massive head. Her breath washed over him, hot and sharp with the smell of smoke. Her eyes looked into his, and in them he saw recognition. He saw trust. He saw hope. "You come with me," Danny said softly. "No more pain, no more cages, you come with me." Pressed her snout against his palm. She held it there, warm and gentle, while the crowd watched in stunned silence. Was the first to speak. "It seems we have misjudged these creatures," he said slowly. "The human's claim has merit." Stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "This proves nothing. She has simply learned to manipulate him. She is cunning, nothing more." "She had every reason to kill him," replied. "She chose not to. That is not cunning. That is choice. And choice requires a mind capable of making it." The elder turned to Danny. "Your claim is accepted, human. The dragon known as is released into your custody under the terms of Provision 7. See her offspring as well." Danny stood slowly, his hand still resting on snout. He could barely breathe. He had done it. Against all odds, against everything stacked against him, he had done it. "Thank you," he managed to say. Said nothing. But as Danny led out of the pen, as the handlers removed the chains and gates that had held her prisoner, the cruel handler watched with murder in his eyes. This was not over. Danny knew that. But for now, in this moment, it was enough. Was free. The transport ship Meridian was not designed to carry dragons. It was a mid-sized vessel built for scientific expeditions, with cargo holds meant for equipment and samples, not living creatures the size of small aircraft. But Captain Ruth Perry had served with Commander Grant for 20 years, and when Grant called in a favor, Perry did not ask questions. Danny led up the loading ramp and into the largest cargo hold. The crew watched from a safe distance, their faces pale with fear. They had heard stories about dragons. They had seen the scars that handlers wore as badges of honor. None of them had ever been this close to one before. "She will not hurt you," Danny assured them. "She knows we are friends." Seemed to understand that she was safe. She settled into the space they had prepared for her, a nest of blankets and cushions that Danny had arranged himself. Her 5 hatchlings tumbled around her feet, exploring their new environment with chirps and squeaks of curiosity. They had never known the world outside their mother's pen. Everything was new to them. Captain Perry approached Danny with caution. "We are cleared for departure," she said. "Earth Alliance headquarters has approved our route to the Callisto Sanctuary. Flight time is approximately 8 days." Danny nodded. His body ached with exhaustion. He had not slept properly in weeks, but he could not rest yet. Something in his gut told him that the danger was not over. He was right. 3 days into the journey, the Meridian sensors detected a ship approaching at high speed. It came out of the darkness between stars like a predator closing on wounded prey. The vessel was military design, sleek and black and bristling with weapons. Captain Perry's voice came over the intercom. "All hands to stations. We have company." Danny rushed to the bridge. Through the forward, he could see the ship growing larger as it closed the distance. A communication request flashed on the console. Perry opened the channel. A familiar face appeared on the screen. "Human," the handler said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You thought you could steal from us and escape without consequence. You were wrong." "I stole nothing," Danny replied. "Was released legally under the terms of our trade agreement." Elder signed the documents himself. His lips curled back from his teeth. "Is a fool who cares more about politics than honor. The dragon belongs to her offspring belong to us. You will surrender them now, or we will take them by force." Perry stepped forward. "This is an Earth Alliance vessel operating in neutral space. Any attack on us would be an act of war." Laughed. "Do you think your alliance will go to war over one human and one dragon? They will condemn us in their councils and write strongly worded letters. Nothing more. They are weak, just like all humans." The channel closed. A moment later, the ship powered up its weapons. Danny felt fear grip his chest, but it was not fear for himself. It was fear for and her hatchlings, for the innocent lives he had fought so hard to save. After everything they had survived, they could not die here in the cold darkness between worlds. "Captain," he said, "can we outrun them?" Perry shook her head. "Their ship is faster, and we cannot match their firepower." "Then we need help." As if in answer to his words, a new contact appeared on the sensors. Then another. Then 5 more. 7 ships emerged from a nearby jump point, their hulls painted with the blue and silver colors of the Earth Alliance fleet. At their head was a heavy cruiser, the largest class of warship that humans built. The communication console lit up again. Commander Grant's face appeared on screen. "Looks like you could use some assistance," she said with a thin smile. Danny stared at her in disbelief. "How did you know?" "I have been tracking your ship since you left," Grant replied. "I told you that Earth could not officially protect you. I never said I would not be watching." The Alliance fleet moved into formation around the meridian, positioning themselves between the transport ship and the vessel. The heavy cruiser brought its weapons online, enough firepower to reduce ship to floating debris. His face appeared on screen again. He looked at the fleet surrounding him, and for the first time, Danny saw uncertainty in his yellow eyes. "This is not over," the handler hissed. "Your compassion will be your destruction. You save one dragon today, and tomorrow you will try to save another. You will spread your weakness across the galaxy until it consumes you." Danny stepped closer to the screen. "Maybe you are right. Maybe caring about others makes us weak. But I would rather be weak and compassionate than strong and cruel." He paused. "Go home is not yours anymore." The ship turned slowly and began to retreat. His face remained on screen for a moment longer, his eyes burning with hatred. Then the channel closed and he was gone. 5 days later, the Meridian landed at the Callisto Sanctuary. It was a place like no other in the solar system. Earth had built it as a refuge for creatures from across the galaxy, beings who had been rescued from abuse or exploitation or environments that could no longer support them. The sanctuary covered thousands of acres of carefully maintained terrain, from frozen tundras to warm valleys heated by geothermal vents. Danny walked down the loading ramp with beside him. Her hatchlings followed, stumbling over their own feet in their eagerness to explore. The sanctuary workers who had gathered to receive them stepped back nervously, but Danny waved them forward. "She is gentle," he promised. "She has had enough violence for one lifetime." Stepped onto the ground and raised her head. For a moment she stood perfectly still, her amber eyes scanning the horizon. Then she spread her wings. They were beautiful, those wings. Golden scales catching the light of the distant sun, membranes thin enough to glow when illuminated. Danny had never seen her spread them fully before. In the compound there had never been room. There had never been reason. She looked at Danny. Their eyes met and something passed between them that did not need words. Gratitude, trust, farewell at least for now. Then leaped into the sky. She rose higher and higher, her wings beating against the thin air. She circled once, twice, 3 times, and then dove toward the ground before swooping up again at the last moment. She was playing. She was free, truly free, for the first time in her life. Danny watched with tears streaming down his face. A young sanctuary worker named approached him. His eyes were wide with wonder as he watched the dragon fly. "You risked everything for her," said. "Your career, your safety, maybe even your life. Why?" Danny did not answer immediately. He watched soar through the sky, her hatchlings chirping from the ground as they watched their mother fly. He thought about the compound about the chains and the electric rods, and the sound of a mother whimpering as her children were taken from her. "Because someone had to," he said finally, "and I was there." Was quiet for a moment. "Do you think it was worth it? All the trouble you caused, the enemies you made?" Danny smiled as descended from the sky and landed beside him. She pressed her snout against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her neck as far as they would reach. "Look at her," he said. "Look at her and tell me it was not worth it." looked at the golden dragon, at her bright eyes and gleaming scales, at the hatchlings tumbling around her feet. He looked at the bond between human and dragon, built on kindness and trust in a galaxy that too often rewarded cruelty. He did not have to answer. The answer was obvious to anyone who cared to see it. Some things were worth fighting for, some beings were worth saving, and sometimes one person with enough courage could change the world. Danny Cole had proven that, and as he stood in the sanctuary with a dragon by his side and an open sky above him, he knew he would do it all again in a heartbeat. Because that was what it meant to be human,